Hi, this is Woki, and today I want to try something a little bit new for me on this channel. It's something that I'm excited about. We'll see how it works. Basically, I've been getting some more time to read papers, to look for like academic research papers in fields outside of the one I was working in grad school. So the other day I just kind of looked up some papers to see kind of what academic research is being done related to books and reading and pop culture. So I found a few interesting ones, and I'm hoping to just start kind of talking about them here because I feel like it combines all of my interests, talking about science and talking about books. Like, why not use that as a way to merge them? The paper that I'm going to be talking about today, it was published in Electronic Markets. It's called Consumer Interpretations of Digital Ownership in the Book Market. The first author on it is Sabrina V. Hallam. I will post a link to it down below in case you want to look for it. The authors on this paper are all from the University of Arizona. So this title, Consumer Interpretations of Digital Ownership in the Book Market, basically all that boils down to is how do we look at our ebooks, which I was interested in partly because I've been reading a lot more ebooks recently, just because I haven't gotten my library card in New York because I've been really lazy about it. So yeah, I've just been borrowing a bunch of ebooks from my Boston library membership, going through my ebook backlog, I guess, which has been good. So yeah, I've just been thinking a little bit more about how I look at my ebook reading versus my physical book reading, because I definitely do prefer reading physical books. It's also something I've been thinking about. I've talked a bit about why I don't buy many physical books. I usually get them from the library. And at the end of last year, I did a tally of the books that I had actually bought that year. But one thing I noted is that I was only talking about the physical books that I had bought. I did not talk about the ebooks that I bought. So it's very clear to me that either that's like, just like an inconsistency to hide the fact that I actually probably do buy quite a bit of books, or there's something more, fundamental to how we view our ebook ownership versus our physical book ownership, some of which is probably not surprising to a lot of you. I think a lot of these things are things that we generally feel, and I was interested in this paper because it means that, the fact that they're doing this in a research setting means that they're starting to try to put some of those ideas together more concretely. I will say that I don't think this paper is meant to be super duper scientific. The way that they structured it is that they did focus groups. They basically did four focus groups. And they divided it up generationally. There was a baby boom group, a Gen X group, and then there were two millennial groups. So one millennial group was like post-college young adult, and the other was college age. So the total cohort was pretty small. I think they said it was about 31 people, and they're not claiming that this is scientific. They're not publishing data or anything really. They're just doing these focus group to ask questions about ebook versus physical book ownership, which I think downstream can then guide actual specific research questions that you can explore more quantitatively. While I don't think that this is a scientific study, I think there's some observations that they made that are kind of interesting seeds of discussion that, yeah, I just thought were cool to see explored in a paper. Overall, they identified 6 themes from their focus groups. The first theme was that people don't really feel like they own their ebook. The 2 reasons that were highlighted is that either it's because, it's not a physical object that you can hold in your hand. The other one, which I haven't really thought about before, but which I thought was interesting, is that you can't really resell ebooks. You can resell or donate actual physical books, but you can't donate an ebook. And so that probably translates into why people think about ebooks as being expensive, even though when you're reading it, the value is the same. Some of the people in their focus group said, well, I can't resell it, so I feel like the prices should be lower, regardless of how the publishing system actually works in deciding those prices. A second theme that they observed in their focus groups is that the people in these groups felt like ebooks reduced their ability to look at books as like a social thing, because you can't gift them or you can't share them easily. There are sharing options on Amazon, but they're somewhat restricted. While I think of books as a social thing in terms of, I talk about them with people on different online communities with my friends. I've never thought as much about books as a social thing in the way that you share them with each other. And it's interesting to see how once you move that into an ebook setting, that becomes a lot harder, which is different from other digital forms of media, like, Netflix or music. Those are things that you can still enjoy easily together, I'm guessing. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it is similar because you can't buy someone a digital streaming version of a movie, so maybe that there is some similarity there. We also don't buy albums for each other. I think the way that when I was younger you might get someone a CD or an album as a gift, I don't don't think of buying albums for people in the same way unless I'm buying like a vinyl for someone. The third theme that they identified is that it's hard to feel emotionally attached to ebooks. Some of the things that they noted in line with this, and maybe emotionally isn't the right word, maybe it's like physically, highlighting and noting things in ebooks is not as satisfying as doing it in your own book. It feels like less of a sense of ownership. There's also the obsessiveness, like that cliche obsessiveness that I think a lot of us have heard over the smell of the book. You also can't display your ebooks and you can't hand them down. So that gets back to kind of that social, like how do we use physical books? How do we, use them as a way to show off to each other? And obviously that's something that people talk about in booktube with people, like how they arrange their bookshelves for each other. You see it anytime people start passing around pictures of like rainbow shelves or like pictures of books where the pages are facing outward, which creates like a really like soothing wall of like just white pages, but that some people also find stressful because they can't see the book. Yeah, I think that gets into interesting ideas about just like what the physicalities of books mean in terms of how we use them to represent ourselves, like aesthetically or intellectually. The fourth theme is that minimalism encourages ebook purchases, and that goes along with that idea that they aren't a thing that you own. And this is definitely in line with my own inconsistency with how I highlight physical book purchases versus how I don't really talk about my ebook purchases, because there is sort of a minimalist approach to how I buy books, and ebooks I don't really treat as a part of that, and that's something that I've thought about. I haven't really reached a conclusion on whether or not I'm okay with it. The fifth theme is that access to a book is sometimes good enough for an ebook, that you don't necessarily always want to show them off. And there's sort of a sense there that in a way, even if you own an ebook, the way a lot of us might think of it is more like we've rented a book than we're actually owning it and displaying it and sharing it. And this is especially true for books that you're not going to show off, so especially books that people might consider trashy. And that's definitely in line also with my ebook purchasing, where I will buy a ton of romance ebooks. I don't really buy many physical copies of ebooks. I've only bought a few, and they're for ones that I really love. And it's definitely in part because I don't think of buying those ebooks as really like, oh, I've bought the book. I just feel like, oh, I'm just, paying a small fee to read it for a short time, as opposed to having it take up space around me. The last theme was actually really interesting to me. This was about the age differences in ebook purchases. Many people think, oh, young people love ebooks, old people don't. Old people hate technology, young people love it. We always have our face in our phones, like that kind of thing. In the focus groups, what they found is that the younger generations actually preferred physical books, whereas there are people in the older generations who preferred ebooks more strongly, in part because of the physical accessibility to it. So there are things like being able to change the font size, which as you grow older is definitely an added advantage. There's also the weight of it. If you want to read, like, say a huge book, say Count of Monte Cristo, as a huge book, that might be a physical strain on your wrists, on your back to carry around, whereas with an ebook, that's much easier and much more comfortable. So those were the themes that they identified. I'm just gonna add a few more thoughts here. I thought those themes were really compelling. I thought they were interesting ideas to pursue. Some of them might seem obvious to a lot of you, or especially a lot of you if you've been following these kinds of conversations, but I think it's always good to have them kind of put a little bit more cohesively together, to have them sort of categorized in easy to understand ways, so that, like I said earlier, downstream people can identify more specific research questions and that they can then back up with numbers. One thing that I didn't see mentioned that I've thought about more recently as I've started reading more ebooks, I think like a lot of people, I work with computers all day, and something I've noticed a lot, because I do most of my ebook reading on my phone or my iPad, is that reading ebooks in the morning is fine and dandy. I love it. Reading ebooks in the evening after a whole day of staring at a screen is much less appealing. I find it physically uncomfortable and I don't like it as much. And that's definitely a part of why I'm like, ooh, I want to read a physical book again, because it's just a lot more soothing on my eyes if I've been working all day on a computer. One of the things that I think will be interesting to see long term is how electronic versus physical goods, like how that market shapes out, especially in terms of how we perceive those items, because you can definitely see that in something like music, right? Like music buying when I was a kid was like, I was excited, I would go to the CD store, I would buy CDs, and then even when I had a computer and like you could turn it into digital music, it was still really exciting to have a CD. And now, like, I wouldn't buy a CD. I've been looking at like my old iTunes library and contemplating like, should I just get rid of it? It takes up so much space on my computer and I don't need it anymore because I can stream off Spotify, and I just don't like, do I need to even own music anymore? Which is not a question that I would have ever thought I'd be asking. Like, that's not a question I would have asked myself like 10 years ago. The only way that people I know actually buy physical manifestations of music are vinyl, and that's like a real collector's thing, and that's much more niche in some ways. And I think it's also a response to the popularity of digital music. But books are obviously different. A lot of us still buy physical books. It's easy to buy used books. It's easy to get books from the library. There's not as much of a push to not have physical books anymore. And it's interesting to, again, to see how it compares as a digital versus physical good versus other things that have made that physical to digital jump. I also thought the response about older people who prefer ebooks was really interesting. That was something I hadn't really thought about, which definitely speaks more to my limitations than anyone else's. But I thought that that's something that is really worth pursuing, just in terms of how we think of digital goods in the marketplace overall. We think of them as like young kids being lazy, but really they offer up, you know, so much opportunity for people who have other physical limitations. They increase people's access overall in some ways. So it's definitely, you know, it's never strict good, never strict bad. It's just complicated. I really enjoyed this paper. I hope you guys enjoy hearing my thoughts about it. Definitely let me know down below if there's anything about this that you thought was interesting. If the things that I'm talking about today seemed obvious to you, again, I don't think the point of this paper was to be revolutionary, to introduce new revolutionary ideas about ebook versus physical book ownership. It's just to, you know, make these ideas more concrete. So let me know how you thought those themes relate to like your own ebook purchases or trends you've seen overall. And I hope you guys enjoyed this new thing that I'm trying. I will get back to you with more papers that I've found that I'm interested in, like kind of diving into related to books and research and all that. So thank you guys for watching. Bye.